So I found this pretty cool library called Flutter Rust Bridge that lets you bring your Rust code into Flutter apps. I thought I would do a quick demo to show how this library works, and we're going to build a small counter app that most Flutter developers are already familiar with. So at the time of recording, this library is very well maintained, and getting started in Linux with this library in Linux is going to take a very short amount of time. So let's get started. And there's a few examples. There is an example for getting started with new projects from a template. Then there is an example that's starting with existing projects. I'm going to go with starting from scratch. If you want to use a quick start method instead, then I would recommend just going over to the Flutter Rust bridge template and then following these steps and use this. We'll basically fork this repository and use it. The tutorial is going to show how to set up Rust and Flutter on a brand new application. So I'm going to do this from scratch. So I've already created a Flutter application, brand new Flutter application. And now that we have that, we can go ahead and add a new folder called Rust for all of our Rust code. So the command was cargo rust vcs none because we already have version control on the root folder, and then we're going to create a library. Once you have created the folder, the project, go ahead to the cargo file and then specify that the crate type is going to be static lib and cdylib. Once we have done that, we have to install the cargo crate, Flutter Rust Bridge CodeGen. Okay, I already installed it. And then we can also install Dart FFI generator. That's already installed. If you're building for Mac or iOS, you'll also need to install Cargo Xcode, but I'm going to skip that step because I'm on Linux. Now on the Flutter side of things, we have to add a few dependencies as well. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll need the Flutter Rust bridge. We'll need the build runner. We'll need freezed. And we'll need freezed annotation. While that's building, I forgot to add the dependencies in Rust. Flutter Rust bridge. We're in version 1, so we can go ahead and just use the first version. Okay, so in order to set up our project for Android, we need to also install Cargo NDK crate. This will take a while, so I'll just pause the recording. Okay, it's done installing. So now that that has installed, let's go over to Android, App, Build Gradle, and we're going to add a couple more steps here. There we go. Basically what it's doing is on each of these profiles, it's going to make sure that we are recompiling our Rust code. And for this to work, we need to make sure Android NDK is known to the system. So in my instance, it's not. So where you find Android NDK, at least on Linux machines, is Android SDK. Um, so depending on how you install it, it would either be just NDK or NDK bundle. So what I have to do is say is equal to, so you'll have to make sure you set that environment variable. Um, Alternatively, what you can do is echo this property into Gradle properties. So what that's going to make sure is for all future projects, it knows exactly where Android NDK is located. I realized I made a small mistake before. Instead of using the squiggly, you want to make sure that the proper path is passed into Gradle properties. Otherwise, when you try to build the application, it won't run. And we want to make sure that previously it was when you copy paste it from the example on their um, documentation, it'll say to use the crate, but instead we want to just use Rust because that is the folder that's pointing to where our Rust code is. Okay, so now that we have um, our build Gradle and cargo files, everything set up, we also set up the Android NDK. We can go ahead and run it. Flutter run. So this will take a time. This will take a little while. So I'm just going to pause it. Pause the recording. Okay. So right now we're not really using any code in the Rust. We're still using the counter is coming from Dart. The button and the interactions are coming from Dart. So let's go ahead and start adding some functionality in our code. So because it's a simple counter, I'm going to go ahead and import the atomic U64 library, and we will add a static variable for counter. We want to have a method for getting the counter. We want to have one for incrementing it, and we also want to have one for decrementing the counter. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that these methods are available for Dart to call, and let's go ahead and do that. Actually, before we start compiling our code um, we want to go ahead and use a different module for this stuff, and then lib, we'll just say mod API. And we will stop our application, and the command to run the code generator is flutter rust bridge codegen. If you remember, we installed it with cargo, and it takes an input, rust input, and that's the file. Uh, so rust source lib.rs is the input, and then we need a Dart output, which is lib bridge generated.dart. Okay, so there we go. So why is this complaining? Ah, shoot. So it's actually a typo on my part. It should really be api.rs. So when you regenerate it, it should be fine this time around. Yeah. Okay, so now that we have generated this stuff, we should be able to go into our Dart code and actually start using this. Oh, and we have this file generated in Dart as well. So this is the bridge that connects to the code that's running in Rust. And before we start making any changes in our Rust code, I'll just go ahead and remove all the comments to clean up. Okay, now that the code's cleaned up, let's start importing the generated code. So we're going to name the base to Rust because that's the name of the bundle. The path will be different based on the platform, so we'll just need to account for that. Here's Windows, oops. So the dynamic library will be it's iOS. There's a typo. There we go. Okay, now finally, there we go. Rust implementation for the API. Okay, so now that we have that, I can start swapping out this counter for the counter that's in that Rust code. So let's do late future int counter. And we will overwrite the init state. There we go. That's the count. I should have named it count instead of counter, but it is what it is. We don't need to worry. Well, yeah, when you want to increment the counter, we have to basically say counter equals API dot increment, and then instead of the text, we'll have to use a future builder in Flutter. Let's do that. We need to get the data from the counter, and the way we do that is by saying get the data from the snapshot, and because it's going to be an array, we want to make sure we get the the first item from there. Or actually, let's just display the first item instead. Okay, looks like I have an error to fix. 1 second. Yeah, so I think I can't access, data might be null, so I have to cover for that. So let's just say data equals null. We can return just return the loading. More importantly, if we specify a list, then I think that should be also happy. Okay, so if data is not there, we'll just say it's loading. Otherwise, we'll show the counter. Let's try this out. So it looks like it failed to find the library um, librust.so. So the reason is that I'm using the x86 emulator, and we're building for, well, we're not building for that target, so we'll just go ahead and add x86 targets and try to run it again. Hopefully this time it'll work. If it doesn't, I'll have to pause recording, figure it out, and come back and explain. Okay, so that did the trick. So let's start adding. So this time around, when we're adding these, we are using the counter that's in Rust. We're only using the increment, but we can always also do the decrement as well. So let's try it. Oh, can I reload it? There we go. It's decrementing now. Okay. I hope this helps.